erects controversy due to the notion of hockey being a predominantly white sport. Considering biased judgment, it culminates in attendance of only 43 black players out of the 700 total athletes, or 5% participant rate as researched by Joel Boyd, an assistant professor in the Department of Orthopedic Surgery at Minnesota University. As you can see in this pie chart, a minimum of the pie chart is representing the 5% black athletes in the ethnical breakdown of the NHL compared to the 95% of other ethnicities in the ethnical breakdown of the NHL. Similar to Boyd, Claudia Rankine, a professor of poetry at Yale University, suggests that blacks have a low attendance in sports due to the notion of because of the ideals of racism in the league. In her article, The Meaning of Serena Williams. This leads to my research question. To what extent does the National Hockey League's racist environment drive black Canadian competitors away from the sport? With racism in the league, this question studies the effect of how it repels black Canadian competitors from the league. Advancing social interactions between both races are essential. Identifying the reason why the NHL creates a racist environment for new players to be adequate to solve the oppression in sports to date. Through my overall research, I concluded that black Canadian participation in the NHL will subside as a result of an extended period of mistreatment created inside and outside the league. Through the psychological perspective, I found that fans in the NHL promote types of emotional oppression to aggravate black Canadian players. Black players such as Devontae Smith-Pelly, a forward for the Washington Capitals at the time in 2018, reflect on events of racism by saying, quote, they're saying the same thing, so obviously there's still a long way to go with hockey, end quote. Smith-Pelly is embarrassed by the fans' behavior when he sat in the penalty box during a 2018 game against the Chicago Blackhawks as they chanted basketball, basketball, basketball. Conversely, George Orwell, author of The Sporting Spirit, argues his point before his passing in 1950. He claims, quote, you play to win in the game has little meaning unless you do your utmost to win, end quote. With Orwell's remarks being presented, one can debate that the players are acting in this way to carry out the excitement and not for reaction of the black athletes. Although white players such as Sidney Crosby, a forward for the Pittsburgh Penguins, reflect on events of racism going on outside the league, such as the murder of George Floyd. He tweets, quote, racism that exists in all forms is not acceptable, end quote. Crosby's response establishes that racism can be found in areas such as attention to fans. Besides wanting to cheer for their team, fans do not control their hostility. Though Orwell agrees with Crosby's statement, he adds, when he criticizes him, quote, even when the spectators don't intervene physically, they try to influence the game by cheering their own side and rattling opposing players with boos and insults, end quote. Nevertheless, the excitement can lead to the misinterpretation of the players and not the fans. Through the social perspective, I found that black players are more probable to be titled with violence than the social workings encompassing them. For example, in October of 2005, Ray Emery, a former black goaltender, wore a goalie mask with the print of Mike Tyson, a former boxer. Emery's print commenced a dispute of him being considered a thug and a sexually assaulting male. Emery's perception of masks is more tolerance. However, Curtis Vogel, a professor in the sports management department at Brock University, claims that there are many other social problems within the sport that have received much less attention in dramatized media, end quote. He intends to argue that other known problems within the sport should be analyzed first rather than just singling out violence. In contrast to Fogel, Stacey Lorenz, a professor in the physical education department at the University of Alberta, and Rod Murray, who was a sessional lecturer at Grant-McElwain University before his passing in 2010, argue their point in their study. They claim, quote, racialized constructions of black athletes as menacing, criminal, and dangerously different were prominent in media coverage, end quote. Lorenz and Murray recognize that racism drives hysteria. They recognize that racism is a motive why whites see a different perception and try to manipulate it to drive blacks away. Once one has a title as a thug, their name is shattered. Through the culture perspective, I found that the ideology of black athletes is their physique compared to their sufficient skills through the stereotypes of the coaching staff. Claudia Rankine, author of The Meaning of Serena Williams, finds in her article that coaches will try to give players equal opportunities to play major roles, as she used example of Patrick Mortiglow. And this source was in The Meaning of Serena Williams of her article. Mortiglow, a French tennis coach, gave Serena Williams equal opportunities to play major roles. Mortiglow, a French tennis coach, gave Serena Williams a black female tennis athlete an equal opportunity to compete in tennis tournaments. Even though coaches in the NHL are presenting biases against blacks for their build and not for fairness. Murderglow gave Williams and her sister an equal opportunity because he showed empathy. But coaches in the NHL do not, since they want the best players for each position. They want black players to be the strong physical players who are willing to be caught up in fights. On the other hand, Janelle Joseph and Simon Darnell are two professors in the department in the faculty of kinesiology and physical education at the University of Toronto. They attest in their book about the topic of stacking. They find that coaches will often put players in a team position that they feel is best for the team. The rules of stacking can be unfair to a black skill in a certain position on the ice. If there was no bias being played in the making of a roster, then there would be no substantial evidence of stereotyping. This leads my research to its first solution. On the surface, researchers find that the enrollment of blacks can be altered. By implementing a solution of altering the NHL draft for young draftees will steadily increase the effort for more black draftees, as Judd Zulgad, host of the podcast Judd's Hockey Show, and Minnesota Wild podcast implements, as well as Declan Goff, co-host of the podcast implement. This solution would allow the draft to be a place where black athletes will feel at ease and comfortable before entering the league. Limitations of this solution may include the public backlash from fans and supporters of the hockey notion to the state. Implications include the long-term effect of recruiting more black draftees to help ease and reshape the color barrier to be equal in years to come. This leads my research to its second solution. In addition, implementing a solution to the NHL's drafts would be essential and beneficial. Creating a system where all 31 teams need to have at least 2 black players on the team would allow for the white players to understand the culture and lifestyle of the 2 players, as Matt Dumbo, black forward from the Minnesota Wild, implements. Limitations of the solution include the increased chance of instigating more racial disputes, yet this solution has implications of recruiting more black players in years to come due to the chance of the 2 black players being able to promote more black players or draftees from the various circumstances that occur. Thank you.
Okay, Stephan, can you tell me, how did you select the strategies you used to gather information or conduct your research, and were those strategies effective?
So the strategies I used to conduct my research was I would go through a journal article and I would read it, but then I would go to down to the bibliography where they cited all their sources, and I would try to look for a source, such as when I used the source of Stacey Lorenz and Rod Murray, where Stacey Lorenz was a professor in the physical education at University of Alberta, and Rod Murray was a sessional lecturer at Grant McElwain University before his passing in 2010. So I'd look for that certain type of journal article, and I would go down to their works cited or bibliography, and I would see if there's a counteracting source that they brought up within their paper to help establish the ongoing debate within my paper. And I would say that that strategy was very effective because it helped guide my ongoing debate within the claim paragraphs, as well as like putting limitations to each claim, basically.
Great, thanks. Mm-hmm. So the second question, how did you use the conclusions and questions of others to advance your own research?
So the conclusion of Curtis Vogel, he made that like violence, when I was talking about the violence in my second claim, about the perception of violence from black athletes and why it's a motive of why they don't want to be in the league. He was talking about like how we shouldn't necessarily just focus on violence. So I was able to take that, and Curtis Vogel was a professor in the Department of Sports Management at Brock University, and I was able to use that conclusion that he made to help settle my ongoing debate, because I found the Stacey Lorenz source that counteracted what he was making. So I was able to use his conclusion and from that perspective of what he was concluding in his peer-reviewed article. So I was able to advance my research because I found the Stacey Lorenz article.
Okay. Well, Rick, thank you.